after the row about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's living arrangements at the Royal Lodge, the Public Accounts Committee has said that it will launch an inquiry into the Crown estate and royal leases. Royal commentators have said that could open a Pandora's box of what we know about the royal family's finances. Giles, do you support this? Is it right that Parliament has a look under the bonnet and works out who's paying what?
I don't think so, no. I don't want to know. I think it's a bit prurient. I like mysteries and I like old things and tradition, and I quite like old money, and I quite like the sort of some of the top-down values that you get out of it. I quite like all the little snobberies that permeate British life. I'm not a mad Republican, and I don't think that they're there by divine right or that they're even terribly admirable people. But I think that Andrew stands aside. He has apparently behaved in really, really sort of terrible ways, which possibly finally do deprive you of the rights to have this cushy little number. But the rest of them, absolutely not. The sort of slow killing of the royal family by a million cuts seems really sad. I think either chop all their heads off like the French did in 1789, and then, well, they did in about 92, didn't they, the killing? But and then spend the rest of your life being the snobbiest country in Europe and wishing that you had a royal family, and everybody there pretends to be the a duke or something, or every third person you meet claims to be the descendant of the Dauphin, and they can't get over it. Or America, where you're obsessed with it. Here, just this endlessly being mean and horrid to them is awful. Why should they pay rent? Edward paid £5 million, and then he gets a free roll for a while. Why should they? Why should one venerate new money over old? Do we want Trump at Mar-a-Lago? Is that in some way better, that he's in some way earned the money to buy that hideous place? I don't think so at all. I think I feel sorry for them. Poor Edward and Sophie do a terrific job schlepping around the country, going to the most boring things, wearing the most uncomfortable clothes, and I absolutely feel they should be left alone. And I suppose we've got a royal correspondent and they have to do something, but I think it's horrible.
Edwina, what do you reckon to this? Because the numbers are quite different depending on who we look at. So Giles just referenced Edward and Sophie. They agreed a fixed deal in 2007. They paid £5 million up front for a lease for, I think it was around 10 years. There are other deals. So William and Kate, for example, pay market rent on the 8-bedroom Forest Lodge, and the range for that is up to, I think, £100,000 a month, wasn't it? 32 to £100,000 a month. So the range is quite broad, and we don't know exactly what. Andrew's arrangements have obviously been gone over, but there are others. For example, the late Queen's cousin, Princess Alexandra's rent, she lives in Richmond Park. It's around £225 a month, which is obviously nowhere near what market rent would be for that kind of a property. What do you reckon to this?
There's something, I agree with Giles. I think there's something rather nasty about this, and I have a feeling it's a big mistake. It is actually the Public Accounts Committee that have called this. Chair, Sir, what's his name? Geoffrey Clifton Brown. He's been in Parliament since 1992 and he's a Tory. It might be worth actually interviewing them and finding out what exactly they think they're up to. We're going to learn a lot about the Crown Estate. We're going to be humiliating some really good, decent people, including, wait for it, 88-year-old Princess Alexandra. We're going to be suggesting that different rules apply because they're royals. Normally, if you buy a lease on a property, you're not paying rent on it as well. And the lease will reflect the market values at the time, and whether, who would you rather have buying this property? People from overseas, people from, I don't know. I don't want to insult anybody. There are wonderful people with lots and lots of dosh, including people like Russians and so on.
Saudis.
This is not a pleasant place to go to. What it might result in a year or two, and this would be really worthwhile, would be a new kind of deal with the royal family. Because the individual members of the royal family don't have an income, and most of them don't have that much money, not in terms of trying to live in London or trying to have nice clothes and all the rest of it.
Come on, Edwina, come on. Have you seen their lifestyles? What's funding that lifestyle?
Well, they live in drafty, cold, horrible houses, eating terrible food, wearing clothes that are sort of ancestral clothes. They have a hideous time.
Yeah, and having to get up early and catch cold trains because that's the way we do things these days, and going and having to be nice to everybody all the time. Stig, you do not have to be nice to everybody all the time. It really is extremely difficult, and they do it beautifully.
Is it as
and there
difficult?
aren't enough of them.
There
aren't enough of them.
There's not enough royals.
No, because there are charities all over the country that really want to have somebody come. We've got the armed forces, all have, the Colonel-in-Chief is always a member of the Royal. I've seen the work they do. You know, whenever they open this or that or the other, an appropriate minister is supposed to be there. So I went to lots and lots of hospital events with different members of the royal family. Their energy is enormous. They are admirable. And they are an asset, and we should ensure that they do not have to grovel around.
Well, I think there's a difference between grovelling around and living in a mansion, though, isn't there? I mean, those two things.
What's good about living in a mansion? It's not. I've been in those palaces. They're horrible, and they're surrounded by mean, nasty servants who rob from them. And the rooms are mostly staterooms, and everything's dusty.
But they could change that, Giles. They have agency if they really wanted to change it. How about this as an argument, Giles? You know, I understand the tradition point, and look, lots of our listeners are royalists, and they're very much applauding both you and Edwina. So you are saying something which I think many people will agree with. How about the argument that it's nice to like old things, but you don't have to like the institution? So I'm not religious. I like churches, but I don't like the religion. I like palaces and old buildings. That doesn't mean I have to like the institution that originally gave birth to them. That seems to be a distinction we could draw.
The alternative is an elected president. How about Tony Blair?
Well, I'm not saying that they have to be no royal family. I'm just saying that maybe they get a cushy deal. How about this, Edwina? They charge rent. So the Duchy of Cornwall and the Duchy, what's the other one that William has? Anyway, you know, they have their duchies, don't they? And they charge rent to the state. So the NHS pays rent to the royal family. Well, the royal family only have these lands by gift of birth, by being part of the state. How on earth could they be making money from the state which they represent? That's crazy.
Yeah, but the crown. This is the kind of balancing act that is done when they work out what the civil list is, how much the Crown Estate is going to pay. It gets revised every, 20, 30 years or so. So, for example, as I understand it, the income from the Crown Estate goes to the taxpayer, and that has enormously increased recently because we have all those lovely wind turbines out on the coast, and that's Crown Estate. You know, the land just outside our coastline is Crown Estate. So there's all sorts of complicated shenanigans that are going on there. What I would say is that in most cases, when you take on a lease, you do it just to have a bit of certainty so you can do a bit of planning. That seems to me perfectly reasonable.
Okay, we've split the crowd. Some of the anti-monarchists are piling in now. It's an interesting perspective in either sense.
Yeah.
Now, what was interesting yesterday was the Public Accounts Committee, following reports in the Times that he actually hasn't paid any rent for 2 decades. The Public Accounts Committee wrote to the Crown Estate, who own the property, on behalf of the public, and they wrote to the Treasury, and they asked them loads of questions about how this deal came about, also asking questions about other royal properties. And the answers came back. And that's when we found out that although he was, in theory, entitled to some money back when he left, they're saying that will be needed now to cover the kind of wear and tear on the building. Now, they're not saying it's such a terrible state. They're saying this is in line with what you might expect.
Just time passing, basically.
Yeah, essentially. And also he's given notice now, formal notice, and the minimum he could give, in fairness to Andrew, was 12 months. So he will be responsible for the property for the next 12 months, but it also means that he might be able to stay there until next October.
And are we going to start seeing some more evidence of the cosy deals? Because there's just a slight feeling, and one of the papers this morning calls it opening Pandora's box, that we might discover all sorts of things about how much royals pay for what.
Yeah, I don't know about Pandora's box or, just a big can of worms, but this does definitely feel like that. So what we also saw from the PAC, the Public Accounts Committee, yesterday was they got back all these answers and said, that's very interesting. Actually, we think we need to delve deeper, and they are going to launch an inquiry. So they're going to do that probably in the next year. There's going to be an evidence session, the date of which has yet to be announced.
Oh, good.
But they're going to to look at all the properties, all the property deals that the royal family has with the Crown Estate. Now, that includes Forest Lodge. That's a new home for Kate and William. Now, that's been described as a forever home, but actually what we found yesterday was that there's only a 20-year lease on that property with William and Kate there. So it's really interesting. We're going to find out a lot more about the rent that they pay and the sweet deals that they have. You'll remember that the Times revealed last week that Prince Edward, for example, pays a peppercorn rent on his big mansion, Bagshot Park at Windsor in Surrey. So I think this is really, it's a really interesting time, because next year, of course, we're going to have a review of royal finances in general. So this is kind of heaping pressure on the kind of scrutiny surrounding all these deals.
Well, they look at one of my bugbears, which is the royal family shouldn't charge the state rent if they own land where there's things like prisons or hospitals or warehouses that the state uses. Well, they look at that, because why should the royal family charge the state anything for this? Because it's all intertwined.
Yeah, I suppose they would see that as a separate issue. So the Public Accounts Committee inquiry is going to look at the Crown Estate.
Okay.
So that's where that's all the land that's owned on behalf of the public. That money, the profits from that, go into the Exchequer and help us, basically the taxpayer. Now, what you're referring to is those duchy properties, those so-say private properties, Duchy of Lancaster for the King, Duchy of Cornwall, which provides an income to William, which is a separate thing, but that is also an issue, and there's obviously been a huge spotlight on that, lots of reporting around that. Why are they charging Ministry of Defence, huge amounts to have their buildings on their land and things like that, and like you say, hospital, NHS properties and things like that. So there is, it's all part of the same discussion isn't it? About what it costs us and what they get out of being members of the royal family and what we get back for it in return.
Just before you go, I've got time for a one-word answer from you. The latest With Love Meghan, the Christmas special, is out at 8 o'clock this morning. Are you looking forward to watching it?
I don't know if I could answer that in one word. Hilary Rose, fortunately, has answered that for us in many, many words, and that's a great piece to look out for. She's done a big review. I haven't seen it yet. It's not on top of my to-do list, to be honest with you. I don't know about you.
Certainly not for me, Kate. We can be joined as one in that respect. Good to speak to you.